This is a quick timeline to give you an idea of how they lived in each other's time. So you had the Prophet ﷺ 63 years, from 569 to 632. Then the next, the oldest of the Imams, or the first one that came, was Abu Hanifa, lived for about 64 years, from 703 to 767. And then before he died, Imam Malik was also from 717 to about 801. He lived for 84 years. And during his lifetime, he and Abu Hanifa did meet, and they had a beautiful discussion and clarified many things, because Imam Malik was critical of Abu Hanifa, but after they met and they had this beautiful discussion, they were able to have great respect for each other. And then you have Imam Shafi'i, lived for 51 years, from 769 to 820. And he also, as you see, was in the time of Malik, and he used to attend Malik's class as well. And then you had Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who was from 778 to 855. He and Imam Shafi also met together and had a lot of beautiful discussions among themselves. So this is the timeline of when the Imams came about. Notice that this putting together of the fiqh by these great men started because the Prophet ﷺ died at 632 until 703 is when Abu Hanifa was born, and he had to live for a period of time before he started to put together his fiqh. So it's almost like 100 years after the Prophet died that we began to see the organizing of fiqh in a structured way. It was not necessary in that early period because everybody basically understood the Prophet, and the complexity of the society was not as such to require them to do that, but it began to get organized as the Islamic Empire grew so big that in the time of Umar and Uthman, and so they had to get more and more answers to solutions. Quick idea of each of the Imams. Nu'man ibn Thabit at-Taymi, he's known as Imam Abu Hanifa, and you can read up. They have a lot of information online in terms of their lives. I just wanted to give you a quick idea about them. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he was of Persian descent, and he lived in Kufa. He was very, very wealthy. He was a wealthy silk merchant, and he had a tremendous. There were many stories told about him, and like for example, one time he did some business selling some clothing, and then later on he found out that there was some defect in the clothing, and it was sold to his customers, and he could not go back to access those customers to return their money. So he took about like 30,000 dinars, and he said, look, give all away in charity, because he didn't want to be held responsible, because he felt so bad that they sold defective goods. And so he gave it all in charity. He grew up from very early, was educated in Kufa. He memorized the Quran. He was very skilled in oratory and fiqh and hadith literature. He did meet at least one Sahaba. He met a lot of tabi'un, people who know a Sahaba, are called tabi. So they are the ones who he had a lot of discussions with them. He had many, many students. He did a lot of traveling. He made Hajj many times, and he would sometimes pay for his students because he was very rich. He had ships, and he had a lot of trading going on with him. And so sometimes he would pay his students to come and study with him. Very generous, very patient. He always, and all four of these Imams, they had problem with the administration of the government. What has happened is that, and this is another part of history which it's, we got to study that separately, but a lot of time what happened, the Imams, they withdrew from governments because they felt that they were being asked to compromise their principles. And so a lot of them, they took a position of, we don't want nothing to do with the government. And the government people became less and less Islamic. And so because the scholars moved away from taking positions in the government, and so the government ended up having power, and they wanted to impose their rulings on the Imams and the learned scholars. And so Ja'far al-Mansur, who was one of the rulers at that time, he wanted Abu Hanifa to come and be a judge in the court of Abu Hanifa, of al-Mansur. And Abu Hanifa refused, and he said, look, I don't want to be a judge. I don't think I'm qualified to be a judge in your court. And then Al-Mansur says, well, I think you're lying. He says, there you go. If you think I'm lying, then that's worse. That means I'm doubly not qualified to be a judge. And Mansur got vexed. And of course, they imprisoned him and they locked him up. And he was poisoned in prison and he died. His school of thought was carried on by his students. And a lot of the literature that came from Abu Hanifa was not directly written by him. They were written by many of his students, of whom he had a lot of students. And he had a lot of teachers as well. That's a brief idea of him. Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik, he was Yemeni, but he grew up, his parents took him very early to Medina, was educated in Medina, memorized the Quran very young, highly qualified person. He spent his whole life in Medina. He had many teachers. His famous work, Al-Muwatta, is still available in English today. And at a very young age, around 20, he started to give fatwa and to have classes in the Prophet's Masjid. He learned a lot of fatwas from the people who knew the Sahaba. And Malik also, again, had issues with ruling and the rulers, Mansur, because Malik, you know, they actually wanted him to. He had actually an altercation with one of the governors, and the governor wanted everybody to to pledge allegiance to the governor and to Al-Mansur. And Imam Malik says that is haram. We should not pledge any allegiance to these people. We should pledge it only to Allah. And so the governor got very upset and actually ordered him to be lashed in public. And so they lashed him in public, and then eventually he died. The Mansur pardoned him, and then he lived out in Medina. But he did not travel anywhere else. And he taught in Medina, and he's very famous, and he has a lot of respect among so many. Muhammad ibn Idris ibn al-Abbas, known as Imam Shafi, he was from the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ, from the Quraysh, from Banu Hashmi, born in Gaza, Syria. And he born the year that Abu Hanifa died. And he lost his father very early. His mother raised him. They were very poor. They moved to the city of Mecca. He, of course, because of his tribal affiliations, was considered a noble lineage. And he memorized the Quran at 7. And at 10, he went to Imam Malik's class. And Imam Malik noticed this kid sitting there, not making any notes, not doing anything. And then he kind of chastised him and said, you come here every week and you don't even write anything down. And then Imam Shafi says, well, lesson 1, when you covered it that day, you said so. The next week you said so. The other day you said so. And in fact, that book that you wrote, Al-Muwatta, I had memorized it from cover to cover. So he had an extraordinary memory. And so Imam Malik allowed him to stay in his class after he saw that this kid was an amazing person. You know, so he has a very famous book, Risala is one. He's known as being the person who have given fatwas in Iraq and in Egypt. So when he was in Iraq, he would give one ruling, and when he went to Egypt, he gave a different ruling because his circumstances was different. He got a lot of trouble also, persecuted by Ma'mun, because they wanted everyone to adopt their Mu'tazilite position, which was that the Quran, you know, they wanted to say that the Quran was a created word of Allah, and those who don't do it would. So he was actually arrested for treason because he refused to do that. But then someone begged on his behalf. One of Abu Hanifa's students actually begged on his behalf and said, hey, you know, this is a good guy, release him. And they released him, and then he decided to move out from Iraq and go to Egypt. And he spent his time there, and he was very famous for, was the first one actually to develop a structured, codified system of fiqh that came straight from the sources. Abu Hanifa was known as the one who would take one hadith and find 100 lessons from it. He would derive 100 principles from one hadith. So Abu Hanifa was known morely for his ability to deduce rules and regulations, whereas Shafi was known for his ability to take the rules and structure them and organize them and categorize them in a beautiful way. He was buried in Egypt. And lastly, Muhammad ibn Hanbal, born in Baghdad, was Arab, educated in Baghdad, was orphaned very early, had a really hard time growing up, but memorized the Quran very early. Again, fiqh, seerah, hadith, became very learned. Again, was persecuted by the rulership of his time. And he wrote several books and was highly respected and was buried in Baghdad. So there are lots more details for each of these and beautiful stories of their lives. So you can always Google and find more information if you would like to know more about them. What is important is, so this is probably the most important part or section that we need to pay attention to, and that is the philosophy of how they form their opinions. What do they consider as important source to use in their decisions that they make? So I don't know if this slide is too small. I hope you can see it. So they all consider the Quran as their main source. Secondly, the Sunnah as the second most important source. Imam Shafi, he only, as I said, he was focused on just picking up exactly what are the rules in the Sharia, because he was codifying that thing. So he only accepted authentic hadith. He didn't use any supporting weak hadith for anything. Thirdly, ijma', which is the consensus of a majority of the companions on any issue. And they consider this to be also the third most important source. So these three, Quran, Sunnah, and ijma', were the foundation in which all of them agreed. Anything that they found within the Quran or the Sunnah or consensus of the companions, they accepted that as a source, as an authentic source to be used in formulating any law or any ruling. Then they have the individual opinion of the Sahaba. So now they have Abu Hanifa, he used the most preferred opinion. When they had like several Sahaba differed, he would make a decision that he thinks this is the one that is more relevant to our situation. Maliki gave full weight to the opinions. Shafi was like Hanafi. And then Hanbali was the same way like Maliki. They just accepted their opinion when they have issues. Weak hadith. We talked about that, and you guys know something about that. Hanafi did not use weak hadith. Maliki did not use weak hadith. Shafi did not use weak hadith. And Hanbali would use it instead of qiyas. So Hanbali rejected qiyas, which we're coming to. And he would prefer a weak hadith over qiyas. Qiyas means analogy, analogical deduction. That you would take a hadith and deduce a ruling from it. Hanbali, if there is a weak hadith that exists, would prefer to use that than any deduction. Hanafi, in terms of analytical deductions, he feel he was equal to those who are doing this, the Sahaba or the Tabi'un or whoever. And so he, and analytical deductions, qiyas, only comes in when there's no clear ruling from the Quran, Sunnah, or Ijma', and there's a matter which don't have any clear rule. Now they have to make deductions. So Abu Hanifa said, I am qualified to make deductions, and so he would do his own. Maliki used his own reasoning. Shafi used his own reasoning and would use qiyas only as a last resort. And of course, Hanbali, he does not want to use qiyas at all. He preferred weak hadith. And then there's something called istihsan, preferring one proof over another. Only Abu Hanifa was interested in that. The rest of them rejected that. Urf, and we'll give some examples later on of how they arrived at these differences. So urf means local custom. So Abu Hanifa would use it when no other binding Islamic customs were available. We couldn't find anything in the sources. He would use local custom. And Maliki used it tremendously in his fiqh. So when he derived his rulings of how he understood the religion, this was a big deal for him. He used it extensively and considered it as an authentic source. And it was mainly from the people of Medina, because he spent all his life in Medina. And he said the Prophet used to live in Medina, the companions lived in Medina. So whoever practiced, the people of Medina, all their practices there, they are an authentic source for us to formulate laws, because they are the people who was closest to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There were over 10,000 companions in Medina. And so he said, where else you will go to get rulings? These are the people who were following Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So when we want to find rulings, we watch how they behaved and we take that as the law. So for him, local custom and the actions of the people from Medina was very important for him. The others, not at all. Customs of the Medina people, Imam Malik would give weight if there's a difference of position. He would choose the one that the people of Medina practiced. Istislah means that which is like for the benefit and the welfare of the community. And of course, he would favor choosing the people of Medina's ruling again. And the others did not. So this is a brief idea of some of the basis in which they formulate their decisions.